of it and go in and rescue the people that are in there.
To be honest with you, we always were afraid of the Pentagon as being a target, but never in our wildest dream to this extent. And so there was just, you know, I'm still in disbelief, total disbelief.
Most everyone in disbelief here. The people who are working here, the fire and rescue crews, are painfully aware of what happened in New York, the devastation there, and they know people who have been lost up there. In fact, the urban search and rescue team is aware that the command staff of the New York City Fire Department was killed when the World Trade Center collapsed. Among the people killed, the fire chief of New York and the head of the urban search and rescue team in New York, Ray Downey. Scott Graham worked and trained with him as he's working here today. He says it could have been any one of us. He said, we've lost a damn good man. Apparently, we've lost a lot of good people today, Gordon and Goodyear.
A lot of police, New York City police officers in that building, too, and both buildings when they collapsed, apparently, Dave.
Absolutely.
Dave, in terms of the rescue operation throughout the evening, at what point do they think they're going to have more comprehensive casualty figures? I
think that's going to be daylight. As you heard the chief talk about, he's getting his estimates from the Pentagon, and I think a lot of that's based on the people that work there. The one thing that's helping them, they think that might keep it toward the low side, they're hoping, is they don't know how many of those offices were occupied, because some of this is a new portion of the Pentagon. It also had some new firefighting capabilities, a sprinkler system, and some firewalls that may assist in the firefighting operation. So, again, no one is clear. Again, the high estimate around 800. We won't know anything more until tomorrow. Definitely a lot of dead bodies in there. They just can't give us a count right now.
Dave, it's now 8 minutes after 11. The fire broke out at 9:38 this morning. Are you still seeing flames?
Occasionally we see a flicker of flames coming through, mostly smoke. The fire's trapped between the ceilings and the slate roof up there. They had to pull firefighters off the roof because it wasn't stable, and they're mainly doing an exterior attack rather than fighting it from the inside because they've lost daylight. They're very concerned. It's a maze in there. We've talked to firefighters who've fought fires in that building before in previous years, and they can get lost very easily there.
And they're going to continue to work through the night.
They will work through the night, pouring water in from the outside. The urban search and rescue team, they did their reconnaissance, figured out a plan of attack. They're working with other urban search and rescue teams from throughout Virginia and nearby that are joining them. They're splitting up their shifts. They told me they're searching the outside rubble tonight. We'll get inside the building at daylight tomorrow.
Dave Statter at the Pentagon, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Doctors at area hospitals continue to treat victims of today's terrorist attack at the Pentagon.
Our Jennifer Ryan is joining us live now from Virginia Hospital Center in Arlington with the latest on that. Jennifer?
This hospital has seen the most people come here today, 42, half of which were released, but we still have 9 people in critical condition. We are also encountering families who are now in the search mode, searching for family members who work at the Pentagon, but they never came home, they never called home, and there is no word tonight from the hospitals or the Pentagon.
We stayed at home looking at TV, trying to hope that she would call in. But when it hit around 6 o'clock this evening, we kind of started panicking a little bit that, hey, it wouldn't have took her this long to call.
Arthur Carver and his family are checking all the hospitals tonight. And of the list of 42 victims at the Virginia Hospital Center, none of them is his 34-year-old sister Sharon Carver of Waldorf.
So we're still wondering and hoping to hear something positive. However, we haven't heard anything as yet.
We've called all the hospitals in the area. Nobody seems to have her yet or knows where she is. And I mean, it's not like her not to call. I mean, she would go to a paid telephone or something. We know that they did find her immediate supervisor, and he's heavily sedated over at Washington Hospital Center.
It has been a chilling day for survivors. Those who delivered injured friends and co-workers from the Pentagon shook in blood-stained shirts as more victims arrived in ambulances, police cruisers, and in people's family cars, some packed 3 deep. Medical supplies are dropped off only long enough to be gathered by paramedics who head back into the field. The Red Cross is also moving precious cargo, blood, which is desperately needed. Hospitals are now preparing morgues, anticipating what may be ahead. And for the Carvers, they pray this day doesn't become even more horrific than it's already been.
That's my little sister, so that's all I'm thinking about right now.
Sharon Carver is a 34-year-old accountant who works at the Pentagon. She is a woman with a very close family. They all share a house in Waldorf, Maryland. The good news, if there's any here today, is that we have not seen any fatalities, but we must also tell you that we're being told we haven't seen them yet. I want to give you some quick numbers on the hospitals in our area. This hospital has seen 42 victims, half went home, 9 in critical condition. Washington Hospital Center has 7 critically burned patients. One of them is in the 8th one is in fair condition. Walter Reed has 1 critical, 1 fair. Nova Alexandria has 21 people tonight. None of them are in critical condition. They're all getting better tonight. And Mount Vernon treated 1 and released them. That's the very latest from the hospitals. I'm Jennifer Ryan. Back to your broadcast house.
Jennifer, in the days to come, I know we're going to hear more stories, personal stories like the one we just did.
Yeah, we're going to hear a lot of stories from people who are simply in a waiting mode right now, and they're also checking lists. Again, the hospitals have had these lists, but as people check them, they realize, too, that there's so much still going out on the scene just 5 miles from here. All day we've been telling you about the real challenge just to get people 5 miles down the road to get help. So, yes, other area hospitals did respond. Those lists are out. If you want to call the other hospitals, they are very willing to help you. But there are still so many more people in the field and so many people in the Washington area who have a lot of questions tonight, and they will also have to wait.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thanks.
In a time of need, Americans, as they always do, are literally rolling up their sleeves to help by donating blood. In fact, some medical facilities say they're turning people away because so many have come forward to help at the same time. So you're asked to please call ahead to arrange for the best time to show up to give blood. Here is a Red Cross number, 1-800-GIVE-BLOOD. Again, to schedule blood donations, call 1-800-GIVE-BLOOD.
The federal and D.C. governments are going to be open for business tomorrow, but area school systems will be closed. You can keep track of all of the closings at the bottom of your screen. This entire region remains under a state of emergency tonight. That is Washington, D.C., Virginia, as well as Maryland. Soon after the attacks today, the mayor of D.C. and the governors of Virginia and Maryland all put their governments in emergency mode. They stepped up security and mobilized forces at their command.
The state of emergency has been declared to ensure that in the event we have an incident, in the event the worst were to happen, we are completely prepared and ready to act.
It's impossible to eliminate a risk anywhere in the world, but we can minimize the risk, and we can make sure that domestic response is such that we save lives and minimize the damage.
The horror of this type of coordinated attack and about the number of people who obviously will have died and are seriously injured, we'll feel it family by family, but as a nation, I don't believe we'll ever be the same.
That was Governor Jim Gilmore, and I think a lot of people echo that, even as a lot of people get ready to head back to work tomorrow. D.C.'s police chief, Charles Ramsey, said, no, things will never be the same again.
Bruce LeShan is joining us now from police headquarters with the latest. Bruce?
Gordon Gravier, city police said just a short time ago here out in front of police headquarters that the last thing they wanted to have to do was worry about school children, and so D.C. schools will be closed tomorrow. City employees are on liberal leave, meaning that they can take the day off tomorrow, but it will come out of their annual vacations. The deputy mayor says that she wants things to return to normal downtown, but the chief of police is offering people no assurances of their safety.
I don't think anything will be the same as it was yesterday, quite frankly, and I don't think anybody can give those kinds of assurances. All we can do is just do the best we can to maintain a level of safety and security, but right now, quite frankly, I don't think anybody has a full handle on what's taking place, but there will never be another day like today. Nothing from this point on will ever be the same.
The president returned tonight to a city that has lost its innocence. He came in protected by a much larger than normal phalanx of helicopters. And all across the city, there are signs of trouble.
I'm trying to get to 14th Street Bridge to catch 395. I heard it was still open.
All of this is full. Over down the pin. We're going to go all the way around.
Police have cordoned off an area 2 blocks around the White House in every direction. Major streets, including Constitution Avenue, remain closed, and it is unclear when they'll reopen.
I feel like it's Pearl Harbor again. Like, this is our generation's Pearl Harbor, and we're in for some more bad days before it's over, I think.
I just can't believe that people, whoever they are, would have the utter lack of respect, you know, for human life, you know. It's it's beyond horrendous. It's beyond it. And it's like, I don't know if I'm scared. I don't know if I'm numb. I don't know what I am, you know?
We're joined now live by Deputy Mayor Margaret Kellums. Let me start with this. Should people come back to work tomorrow? You're going to be open. Should people come into town?
The government is going to be open and operating on liberal leave, and we leave it up to the good judgment of people to make the decision. Because the D.C. public schools will be closed tomorrow, we understand a lot of people will want to stay home with their children, but the government will be open, and the people, certainly the emergency employees and the non-emergency employees who can come to work and are comfortable doing that should come to work.
Now, up till now, one of the big security concerns, of course, has been those protests scheduled for the end of the month, the IMF World Bank protests. What are you doing about that? Are you worried about it?
Chief Ramsey expressed his concerns earlier tonight, and of course I think everyone is appropriately concerned. Today has really cast a new light on that issue, but our focus right now is on today and on tomorrow and getting through the crises we have here. The meetings are a federal event, and we will work in close consultation with the federal government to make that decision.
Chief Ramsey wants them to be canceled.
I think it's appropriate for the chief of police who's suffering through the security concerns to be duly concerned about being able to provide security. We're talking about having several thousand police officers planning to protect a building and provide some security to the meetings going on and manage some protesters. We're now looking at an entirely different circumstance with, terrorist acts of a dimension that we were not considering.
Deputy Mayor Margaret Kellums, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's a tough day for everybody and for you. So that's the situation. We've also had a chance to talk to some of the protest organizers, and apparently they have scheduled an emergency meeting for tomorrow where they're going to try and decide what their next move is and whether they will go ahead with those protests scheduled for the end of the month. Gordon Gravier, back to you at Broadcast.
So we may know something in the next few days, perhaps, right,
Absolutely.
Bruce Leshan, thanks very much. Well, the instruments of today's attack, the instruments of death, 4 U.S. commercial airliners, all of them hijacked. Let's take a look at how it unfolded again this morning. American Airlines Flight 11 leaves Boston bound for Los Angeles. It is hijacked. It smashes into the North Tower of New York's World Trade Center at 8:45 a.m. United Airlines Flight 175 also leaves Boston, also bound for Los Angeles. 18 minutes after the first crash, this hijacked plane smashes through the South Tower of the World Trade Center. American Airlines Flight 77 leaves Dulles International Airport bound for Los Angeles. Flight 77 is hijacked, crashes into the Pentagon at about 9:38, 9:43 a.m. United Airlines Flight 93 leaves Newark International Airport bound for San Francisco at about 10 a.m. It goes into a field near Shanksville, Pennsylvania, well short of its apparent intended target, the presidential retreat at Camp David, Maryland.
Well, Gordon, as you said, the day of terror began this morning just before 9 o'clock when the first plane hit the first tower of the World Trade Center in New York City. Tonight, the Twin Towers are no more, and much of lower Manhattan remains in chaos. At 8:45 this morning, American Airlines Flight 11 crashes into the North Tower of the World Trade Center.
I basically got on all fours and I just crawled to the door, hoping that I was crawling the right way.
At 9:03, the second plane, United Airlines Flight 175, hits the South Tower. It is chaos on the streets of lower Manhattan.
Many people hurt. What about the casualties? What have you seen? Uncountable. Let's go, let's go.
Many of the 50,000 people who work inside the Trade Center get out any way they can. Fellow New Yorkers rush to help.
We're watching people fall from the building, and then we just saw the whole side of the World Trade Center just fall right off, and it caught a couple of us, and we just made a mad dash all the way down here.
It is only the beginning. In the next 90 minutes, both towers crumble to the ground.
Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. It collapsed. The top floors collapsed down. I saw it blow and then ran like hell. Thank God. I'm 69, but I can still run.
Mayor Rudy Giuliani speaks to the people of New York.
The people in New York City can demonstrate our resolve and our support for all the people that were viciously attacked today by going about their lives and showing everyone that vicious, cowardly terrorists can't stop us.
The mayor tours the hardest hit areas in lower Manhattan, where in some places, personal mementos are bittersweet reminders of lives suddenly gone. And you're looking now at a live picture of New York City. Gordon, it's different from what we had seen prior to earlier today. The Twin Towers, which so mark that skyline, are gone, missing. There were 110 stories high. They crumbled to the ground earlier today. We should tell you that tonight, New York Mayor Rudy Giuliani says some people are still alive in the rubble of the Twin Towers. Apparently, at least one person called from the rubble via a cell phone. How they managed to get through, I don't know, but they were able to call a relative. And despite the destruction in New York City, the city will open for business tomorrow.
Barbara Olson, a conservative commentator and attorney, was on board the hijacked Boeing 747 that slammed into the Pentagon.
Olson somehow managed to get to a cell phone and call her husband, Solicitor General Ted Olson, that her flight was in the hands of terrorists. Tim O'Brien of CNN files this report.
Our understanding is that Barbara Olson was on the plane, a frequent commentator on CNN and the wife of Solicitor General Ted Olson. She called her husband twice during the hijacking to tell him the plane had been hijacked. And they lost contact once, and she called back. After the first call, Olson called the command center at the Justice Department to inform them of this hijacking, and they said they knew nothing about it but would track it down. Barbara Olson told Ted the following story, that all the passengers were herded to the back of the plane, including the flight personnel, including the pilot. And the only weapons she mentioned were knives and cardboard cutters. You would think if there were a machine gun or any other kind of gun that she would have mentioned that. But the only weapons she mentioned were knives and cardboard cutters. I asked Ted if she made any reference to nationality of the hijackers or any suspicions about the motive, and he said she made no reference to that at all. They didn't have a whole lot of time to talk. She said to Ted, "What do I tell the pilot to do?" Somewhat typical of Barbara, a take-charge kind of person. But there was nothing they could do, and they're all trapped in the back of the plane.
Including the pilot.
And there were reports earlier of folks who said the people that are responsible for this flew the planes themselves, that the pilots of these planes would never have crashed either into the Twin Towers or into the Pentagon. So apparently first-hand account from Barbara Olson to her husband, Ted Olson. It really is chilling when you listen to that.
All right.
Well, families of victims of the ill-fated Dulles flight have gathered at a hotel near the airport.
Greg Statter joining us now live from the Marriott in Herndon with the story. Greg.
We're inside the press briefing room at this hour. Family members of the victims have been kept in a secret location here. There is heavy security at the hotel, a lot of police officers coming and going. About 20 family members have been counseled by ministers trying to help them get through this tragic experience. The flags are at half-staff at the Dulles Marriott, as family members of those who were on board American Airlines Flight 77 are consoled. Reverend Stephen Johnson has been counseling relatives of the victims.
In a situation like this, you don't tell them a lot. You listen, you offer a sympathetic ear, some comfort, some consolation, simply the fact that you're there and present, and are committed to being there as long as they need someone to talk to.
Flight 77 slammed into the Pentagon this morning, erupting into a ball of flames, creating a huge crater in the country's military command center. 64 people died in the attack. The Red Cross now involved, helping those left behind to deal with this tragedy.
Little kids sometimes have difficulties with this because they don't understand. Adults don't understand. I don't understand. It's a senseless thing that we're dealing with here, and it just doesn't, it defies reason, so it's very difficult in that regard to say anything about it.
Dulles International remains shut down. Only employees and members of the media allowed in. Concrete barriers have been put in place as a security measure, as thousands of passengers now stranded in the D.C. area wondering when they'll get home and why the United States is under attack.
That's crazy. I mean, I really am shocked. Like I guess we all are. I mean, it's just amazing we live in a world like this today.
And once again, Dulles International Airport, National Airport remain closed at this hour and will remain closed until noon tomorrow or possibly longer. Greg Starter reporting live in Dulles. Let's go back to broadcast house.
All right, Greg, thank you very much. Now, we had the Twin Towers, and, of course, then we had the Pentagon, but the terror did not end with the attack on the Pentagon.
About a half hour after that, another hijacked United Airlines flight crashed about 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh in the town of Shanksville. Reporter Dick Rust joins us now from Somerset, Pennsylvania, with the latest on that. Dick?
This is Middle America, and this is a place one would think should be far beyond the reach of madmen. But tonight, this small, quiet piece of country here in southern Pennsylvania is indeed one of the places in which our nation has been deeply, deeply wounded. There were 45 people on board the hijacked United Airlines 757 when it nosedived into the ground at the edge of this old strip mine. Paula Pluta saw it all from her front yard and ran to the place the plane crashed.
Little pieces of metal. There wasn't anything there but little pieces of metal. I unfortunately did not see bodies because I don't think I could have handled that, but just the impact of what's going on in the nation, and here it's just very disheartening because you don't realize how close it can get.
No piece of wreckage was larger than a telephone book. No identifiable bodies were found. Just moments before Flight 93 crashed here, a passenger managed a cell phone call to the local 911 dispatcher. "We're being hijacked," he screamed. "We're going down." And then he died.
And I immediately said a prayer too because I knew that there was no life left on that plane.
Just what happened on that plane is now up to the FBI and other federal agencies who are in charge of the investigation. They've set up a command post behind me, and there's construction work going on here so that communications and what becomes now a recovery project can go on. Witnesses have said that they saw the plane actually flying upside down with the tail down, and that it plunged into the earth at least a 60-degree angle, possibly straight down, which would account for the small crater about 20 feet around and at least 10 or 20 feet deep. The bulk of the remains of that plane and all the 45 people who are on board may be buried deep in that crater just in the field beyond these trees here.
Dick, of course, you know that many people believe the plane, where it crashed wasn't the intended place for that plane to go down, that it was, in fact, Camp David, the presidential retreat.
Yes, the plane originated in Newark, New Jersey, 38 passengers, 7 crew. It was bound for San Francisco. It crashed here about 80 or so miles southeast of Pittsburgh, but the plane may have been headed back around to the Washington area. That's one theory and one of the intended targets, and it's still a matter of great speculation, and it is really one of the foremost theories here in Pennsylvania, is that the plane was headed for Camp David, but fell far short. Why it fell here into this rural area, no one knows yet, and that will be the focus of the investigation here throughout the night and into many days to come.
Dick Russ, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dick.
All over the country, people are gathering to pray following this disastrous day. At one church in Prince George's County, the congregation has special reason to pray. 9 Eyewitness News reporter Stacy Cohan has that story.
At the First Baptist Church of Highland Park in Landover, Maryland, they sang, they prayed for a church member they have lost and for the thousands in our nation that are grieving tonight.
All the lives affected in New York, in Washington, in Pittsburgh. Oh God, we pray.
This church has been deeply affected. The daughter of a longtime church member called Reverend Henry Davis tonight, telling him she believed her father had been killed in this terrorist attack.
Our father was on one of the planes going to Los Angeles today, and again I had prayer with his daughter and their family right before starting this service. Give strength tonight. Give strength.
And so Reverend Davis called his community to the church, shouting to the heavens and to those responsible for this attack, "You can tear down our buildings, but you can't tear down our souls."
America needs us. The world needs us.
In Landover, Stacy Cohan, 9 Eyewitness News.
Stacy Cohan reporting. The largest criminal investigation in the history of the nation is underway tonight. Headed by the FBI and joined abroad by the CIA and the NSA, the process is underway to bring those responsible for today's savagery to justice. Gary Reels in the Satellite Center monitoring the investigation, which is still in its early hours.
Gordon, it is very early. The task is massive, but already there is much to work with, and there is a leading suspect, if for no other reason than his past deeds of brutality against our nation.
Almost instantly, Osama bin Laden rose to the top of the list of suspects. Among international terrorists, the one-time Afghan freedom fighter is far and away the most accomplished and most capable in terms of money, resources, and determination. Harbored by the Taliban Islamic government of Afghanistan, bin Laden has links to the earlier World Trade Center bombing and the U.S. Embassy bombings in Africa. The very first intelligence gathered today, communication intercepts between bin Laden's supporters discussing the U.S. attacks. Senator Orrin Hatch says associates of bin Laden were acknowledging a couple of the targets were hit. At this early point, however, no evidence points directly to bin Laden or, for that matter, anyone else. Not only the crash locations are going to be scoured by the FBI, of course, the points of origin for each of the hijacked flights will be two. The airports at Boston, Newark, and Dulles International. There may well be surveillance video of the boarding areas. Agents will have cockpit voice recorders if recovered, which should shed light on the forceful takeover of the aircraft, which appear to have been taken down by suicide pilots, except for possibly United Flight 93 out of Newark, the one that crashed into the open field in western Pennsylvania. They also will have cellular telephone communications, at least one person on each of the 4 flights able to risk making telephone calls. Barbara Olson among them, who made that tragic call to her husband, Solicitor General Ted Olson.
Another major element of the probe, of course, how the hijackers, and there apparently were several on each flight, managed to board with knives and makeshift weapons. So many questions, so much ground to cover. The global investigation is still getting organized, but theirs is a goal uniting much of the nation and the world tonight.
Communications intercepts, Gary.
Yeah, again, that's, you know, secret communication intercepts by U.S. intelligence abroad. That's what they picked up. And again, it's suggestive of perhaps bin Laden and his group, but then again, they could have been merely discussing what had already happened. So,
Gary Reels, thanks very much.
Thank you, Gary. It's been a day of unprecedented sights in New York City, at the Pentagon. Here's another unprecedented sight. This is President Bush being escorted into a security bunker in Nebraska. Before returning to the White House from a visit to Florida, Mr. Bush was taken to Offutt Air Force Base, home to the U.S. Strategic Command, which controls the nation's nuclear weapons. It was there that he convened a National Security Council meeting by teleconference.
Joining us now to talk about today's terrorist attack is Dr. Nicholas Kittrey, an expert on terrorism and international law at American University. Dr. Kittrey, thank you, first of all, for joining us at this late hour.
My pleasure.
The Taliban were very quick to say that, oh, this was much too complex for somebody of Osama bin Laden's expertise to have carried out. What's your response to that?
Well, my sense is that if a government says that a particular individual and his group are not capable of doing it, they must know quite a lot about his capability. So the mere proclamation that they know he could not doesn't mean really anything. I think the reason he is the prime suspect, and many have compared this, right, with the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor. The Japanese never declared war on us. It was a surprise. He declared war on the United States 2 years ago. He specifically said that he is out. He issued a religious decree because of some religious affiliations that he has, indeed saying that it's the moral duty of every Muslim to kill as many Americans and their allies as possible wherever it's possible.
Dr. Kittrey, though, he never took responsibility for previous attacks for which his associates have been convicted. Tanzania in '93, or rather in '98, the World Trade Center bombings in '93. So his M.O. is to sort of remain in that shroud of mystery.
He's very much so. As a matter of fact, one of the early reports was to link him with the attack in Yemen on the American naval vessel. And the only thing they had to link him is that he was seen with a Yemeni dagger walking around. Well, I have a Yemeni dagger in my office, but I don't walk around with it.
Would you consider this a major failure of American intelligence, or is this guy that good, if indeed he's the person behind this?
Well, I think there's going to be quite a lot of browbeating and heart-beating about the question of intelligence. The fact that something that complicated could take place, that required a lot of planning, which everybody will have to tell you that it could not just be a private organization, they needed governmental support. They needed, no question, American operatives who studied information here because they knew precisely this is not something you sit in Afghanistan and check on the routes of American planes. So there was a tremendous amount of collaboration here. The fact that none of this leaked, usually there's some leak. I mean, it just doesn't work that perfectly. It is very surprising, and it's really a reflection on what somebody had said. Maybe our intelligence has been looking in the wrong places.
One way they defeat American intelligence, they operate in individual cells.
Yes,
so that cell 1 doesn't know what cell 2 is doing, and cell A doesn't know what cell B is doing. Is that correct?
I think that is quite correct, with the exception, there's no way they could have coordinated 3 or up to 5 planes to know precisely when to enter without a system of communications between them. Even if you do it in code, it was really quite complicated.
So how does this change the way that our government operates, our intelligence operates, and we as Americans live?
Well, I think this serves to dramatically differentiate what happened in World War II with the question of the Japanese invasion. At that particular time, the Japanese recruited and used a big segment of the Air Force. It was a real big effort. And here's a little organization supposedly managing to hit the heartland of the United States. Because according to bin Laden, the United States is evil. The United States is the devil. The United States is the beast. And he decided he's going to hit at the belly of the beast. And indeed, he's demonstrating globalization.
How do you catch
globalization is not only economic globalization, but globalization of terrorism. He is able, with limited resources, supposedly.
How do you catch somebody this elusive?
Well, my sense is that nobody is all that elusive. I would like to say today we are trying to understand what's going on. This is a late show, so it's the beginning of tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to start talking about what could we do, right? Who do we do it against? There have some people who said we have not been tough enough against terrorism. But it's very difficult to be tough against terrorism because they're a moving target. They are not always there. So the question really is there an organization? Is he the head of it, or some other organization? Is there a government, which is the rogue government? And the third, I think, which is a very important issue, is to make sure that we get moderate Islamic leader to take positions on these things. Because indeed, what has happened is not going to serve. Not the Palestinians, not Arab Americans, not Muslim Americans, not the Middle East that is in need of change.
Dr. Kitri, I hate to interrupt you. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Appreciate your thoughts on what happened today. We've got to go to New York City.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank you very much.
Where they're
nice
still
with you.
coping with what happened today. A live news conference with Mayor Rudy Giuliani in New York City.
Where there are people, not only the ones that we know about, but hopefully others. A group of firefighters were at St. Vincent's Hospital that were in a void for 4 or 5 hours. And we're hopeful that there are other situations like that. And that's why our rescue workers are working so furiously.
How big a group was that?
That was a company. It was a group. No, it was about 7.
Yeah, it's 5 guys and most.
5 guys,
6. 6 men.
This was earlier today. They were in I believe 1 World Trade Center, and the firefighter described to me that they were there for about 4 or 5 hours, And when they walked out, they were shocked to see that the building had come down, because they knew there had been damage, but they had been in a void, so they had been protected.
What unit are we talking about here?
I'm not sure.
Forget.
We'll find out for you.
I think I remember, but I don't know.
Can you just tell us again about the two Port Authority police officers, how they were found, their condition?
No, the only thing we know is that they were found a while ago, that they're alive, and we'll get you more information about their condition.
And since we're talking about the Port Authority, I guess it's a reasonable assumption there's a large number of Port Authority police officers missing as well.
I'm sure there are. We don't have those exact numbers, as well as Port Authority personnel, the people who work for the Port Authority.
Wasn't their office in?
Yeah, there were officers there, and so we don't know how many people were actually at work. The first attack was at about 8:50, and then there was time to evacuate a lot of the building. So we're not sure at this point how much of the two buildings were evacuated in that period of time between the first attack by the airplane until the first building came down. We're hopeful, because we saw a lot of people leaving. We all did at the time we were down there. We're hopeful that a lot of people got out of the building, but we don't know the numbers yet.
We picked up the news conference in mid-sentence with Mayor Rudy Giuliani of New York, but apparently some optimism that there are still some people alive in the rubble of those Twin Towers.
All right, let's go to Gary Reels now. You have something new, Gary?
Quick update on the investigation, Gordon and Gervier. Apparently the FBI is getting ready to make one of their first stops in what's bound to be a very lengthy and extensive investigation. We understand that federal agents are now preparing and have issued or are in the process of receiving search warrants. Affidavits have been filed down in the Miami area, apparently in connection with a number of Osama bin Laden supporters. It's unclear if they reside in the Miami area of South Florida or have just been there recently, but it appears that there are going to be some search warrants executed in the Miami area in the next few hours.
Gary, thank you very much. Yasser Arafat, Palestinian leader, earlier today condemned today's attacks. Here's the latest reaction from Arafat.
إننا ندين هذا العمل الإجرامي الأليم. We condemn this criminal, painful act. ونعرب عن تعاطفنا مع أسر الشهداء والضحايا. We express our sympathy to the families of the victims. God bless you. God bless you. God bless you.
Palestinian leader, yes.
Yes, chairman of the PLO, Yasser Arafat. Well, today's events have shaken the sense of security that many of us here in the D.C. area and across the country have. Let's review now the sequence of today's terrorist attacks beginning in Manhattan. At approximately 8:45 Eastern Standard Time, a plane crashes into one of the towers at the World Trade Center in New York. Some 18 minutes later, television viewers across the country watch in astonishment as a jetliner flies right into the second Trade Center tower. In Sarasota, Florida, President Bush calls the crashes an apparent terrorist attack and a national tragedy.
And have ordered that the full resources of the federal government go to help the victims and their families, and to conduct a full-scale investigation to hunt down and to find those folks who committed this act.
About an hour after the attacks on the World Trade Center, a plane crashes into the Pentagon in Northern Virginia.
It had no landing gear down, and it was coming very, very rapidly, and then it took a dive, and I saw it coming, and I hollered, hit the deck, and everybody in the office hit the deck because they knew that the World Trade Center was on fire.
9:30 a.m. Government buildings from the White House to the Capitol are evacuated as officials cite credible threats of terrorist attacks. The Federal Aviation Administration shuts down aircraft takeoffs across the country. Just before 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, one of the World Trade Center towers collapses. 30 minutes later, the second tower also crumbles. Then a fourth explosion rocks the debris.
I hope I live. I hope I live. She's coming down on me. Here it comes. I'm getting behind a car. There's all these noises. I don't know what it is. They say someone needs help.
Yeah, Mike! Mike! Mike, come over here! Yeah!
Anybody need a doctor?
At 10:35 a.m., victims of the attack on the Pentagon arrive at Virginia Hospital Center. 26 people are confirmed injured, but no fatalities reported. At 11:30 a.m., American Airlines confirms that 2 of its flights were hijacked and crashed into the World Trade Center. American Flight 11 from Boston to Los Angeles with 92 passengers aboard, and American Flight 77 from Washington to Los Angeles with 64 people aboard. United Airlines also confirms that United Flight 93 from Newark to San Francisco crashed 80 miles southeast of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The plane carried 45 passengers. The airline also reports that United Flight 175 from Boston to Los Angeles with 65 people on board crashed but would not say where. Gordon, it's been a long day, and I think that timeline was done earlier in the day, and some of those times may have been a little bit off.
Let's go to Dave Statter, who is at the Pentagon right now. Dave?
You're certainly hearing from New York some miraculous stories of people who have survived in void spaces. Sorry to report we have nothing to report like that here. The last word we had as we take a look at the Pentagon and the firefighting operations and rescue operation that continue is that the death toll here will be in the hundreds, coming from Arlington Fire Chief Ed Plauger, as we heard earlier this evening. The high estimate, and everybody's hoping it doesn't go that high, 800. Search and rescue crews working in the rubble outside tonight. Firefighters working from outside, pouring water into the building. The inside operations will continue at daylight tomorrow, when the efforts inside on search and rescue from the urban search and rescue teams and the firefighters making, again, an aggressive attack to try to stop this fire that's burning on the underside of this roof and burning off the roof of the Pentagon on this side of the building.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave. So many played a part in helping to rescue those trapped inside the Pentagon after the crash, including the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld. Some of those folks were recovering from their own injuries tonight. Eyewitness News' Tracy Wilkins talked with one of those people.
Right now, we just had a middle section here of the E-ring of the Pentagon collapse.
Minutes after a commercial airliner was flown into the Pentagon,
We don't know who is inside or how many people are inside.
There was chaos, confusion, and there were also heroes.
He had just started taking people out. He took 3 to 4 people out before he himself had the smoke had overcome.